Show today starts out with Ken Van Doren. He is running against Congressman Ron Kind for the 3rd Congressional District. That's the far western part of our listening area. It goes all the way from Grant County all the way up to St. Croix County, which, of course, was eliminated, and Ron Kind got to draw his own lines and make the district a little more comfortable for himself. Of course, I don't think congressmen should be able to draw their own lines. Voters should pick their congressman rather than the other way around. So, former Boston City Council member Ken Van Doren's on the live line with us. Ken, how are you today?
Happy. We're having a ball out here terrorizing incumbent politicians.
Terrorizing incumbent politicians. Well, some politicians are better than others. Why did you decide to take on such a huge task of taking on an incumbent congressman who takes money from Charles and David Koch?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. You should mention that. You know, he accepts that money even after he agrees not to.
Correct.
A friend of mine called him on that, and it was pointed out, I think Media Trackers pointed out, that they found another donation after he promised not to take it. But see, that's the thing. Ron Kind is a lot more vulnerable than anybody thinks because he says one thing and he does another. An example, he's just moderate, but I don't think there's anything moderate about it.
Well, what does moderate mean?
It means you don't stand for anything in my book.
I was going to say, I don't know. That word seems to have, to me, if you're describing Ron Kind as a moderate, it's somebody who takes Wall Street money and is essentially bought off.
Well, yeah, even as he disparages Wall Street, he bails them out. He doesn't want to take a look at the Federal Reserve and how they create money out of thin air and feed it to Wall Street to prop up the house of cards known as our economy. He bails out the banksters, and a lot of that money, by refusing to audit the Fed, they've been able to create $16 trillion in the first 2 years after the crash to bail out foreign central banks and 35 privately owned foreign banks. What's with that? Why is that our responsibility?
Well,
but
there should certainly be more. At a minimum, there should be more transparency. That's for sure.
Well, absolutely. And we've got this ongoing Fed TARP program, which is bigger than the original, where the Federal Reserve is buying up about $40 or $45 billion a month in U.S. Treasuries, and another 40 or 45 in mortgage-backed securities. So just think, the hedge funds, they put together a pool of mortgages that they buy at a discount, and the banks leverage the money, that is, create money out of thin air, to give to the hedge funds, and then the pool of mortgages is securitized on Wall Street, and then the Federal Reserve buys it up, and if it's fraudulent paper, guess what? The people who originally wrote it are not held responsible. That's a big part of the problem, and the effect of it is to transfer wealth from the middle class to not only the rich, but the super rich of the world.
Tell me a little bit about your political philosophy without using all the cliche labels. Where do you stand on issues? What's a Congressman Ken Van Doren? Are you going to be like Eric Cantor and John Boehner? Are you going to be like? No,
those are phonies. They say one thing and do another just as much as Ron Kind does.
I guess you're not getting any money from them, huh?
No. See, the Republican establishment is already thrown in with a little neocon in my race. I'm sorry. And, he wants...
Is this the Ron Johnson staffer that's running?
Oh, no. That guy dropped out, and he's actually... there was a 20-year vet. I won't give his name because I'm not going to advertise for him. But
you do have an opponent in the primary.
Yeah, there might be 2 of them, but I don't have any opponents until everybody else turns in their signatures, and I think between myself and I, we're about halfway. Sorry about that, halfway to the minimum. I'm going to see if I can find a quieter spot here.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You were on the Boston City Council.
Yep.
What are you most proud of when you served in public office?
Well, actually, the thing I'm most proud of is beating Barry Goldwater in an election when I lived in Arizona.
You what? What do you mean you beat Barry Goldwater?
Well, see, they had something called the Rio Salado Project, which was a thinly disguised crony capitalism deal where $3 billion from the public were going to be used to transfer wealth to the developers. And I don't mind developers getting rich. I just don't think they should do it on the back of the taxpayers. Not only that, they were going to create a board of directors that was not elected, had power of eminent domain and the power of taxation, and were untouchable by the voters in the Valley of the Sun there. And despite the fact that 5 out of 6 mayors, plus Barry Goldwater on his deathbed, endorsed this project, Ken was one of the 2 lead debaters on that. And on a shoestring, we were probably outspent 100 to 200 to 1. We beat them 2 to 1 at the polls.
When did you move to Wisconsin?
Well, I was born in Wisconsin. I only spent 8 years in Arizona. And then in the second year I was in Arizona, I accomplished this feat. And it's still, to this day, the biggest feather in my cap. I also helped defeat baseball stadium subsidies and subsidies to light rails that nobody would use. So, I've got a long political history, and it's very consistent. And, the major theme that I want to support is that the major responsibility of government is to protect our rights, and those rights are life, liberty, and property. When the government goes beyond that, they're almost certainly violating one or more of our intrinsic rights.
I take it that you don't support things like a minimum wage.
Well, okay, Sly, we're going to part company on something, and that's certainly...
That's fine.
And that's one of them. That's one of them. Why do we need a minimum wage of $10 an hour? When I was first married, I supported my family reasonably well on 5. And again, it gets back to the fact that the banksters steal the wealth of the little people and transfer it to the rich. So, if we had a more equitable system that didn't subsidize the rich, that didn't favor the rich, that didn't exclude competition from upstarts, the people on the lower end of the scale would be better off.
Well, what departments would you eliminate if you were in Congress?
Well, I would start with the Department of Education, because ever since we've had a federal Department of Education, the quality of our local schools has gotten less, and more control has been transferred to Washington, D.C.
But is that a correlation, or is that something else? There's poverty.
Well, I know that correlation is not causation, if that's what you're getting.
Right.
But I definitely believe that it is causation. And
why? How is the federal government... Now, look, I didn't agree with No Child Left Behind, but how has the federal government wrecked education?
Well, there's certain things that you got to jump, hoops you got to jump through in order to get that No Child Left Behind money. And I think most of those things that are requirements of NCLB are negatives, and they drive up the cost without driving up the quality. See, most teachers... Today's teachers are more bureaucrats, paper shufflers, than they are teachers. And the more requirements we place upon them, the longer the hours they work and the less they are able to control what goes on in their own classroom, because they're so darn busy shuffling paper. And, and the federal government is a big part of that, and in spades with this Common Core program. And believe it or not, there are some progressives who are joining with conservative and libertarian elements in fighting that right here in the state of Wisconsin.
By the way, Ken Van Doren with us on the Big FM 93.7. He's running for Congress in the 3rd Congressional District, and in our listening area, that would be parts of Grant and Crawford County, the southern end of it. But Ken, by the way, when it comes to Common Core, I have to be honest with you. Whenever somebody starts talking to me about Common Core, my eyes glaze over, and I get so bored I lose track of what's even going on. Full admission, Common Core just bores me to death.
Okay. Well,
now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't talk about it. I just, to me, it's another testing system, and they're trying to set up benchmarks, and I don't know why people are so upset about it. I don't know why what the big hubbub is.
Let me just give you 2 things to be upset about. Under George Bush, there was something called total information awareness, where under George Bush, the federal government wanted to know everything about everybody. Today, our medical records are in possession of the feds. There hasn't been any financial privacy in this country for quite some time, just as much because of Republicans as because of Democrats. And as a part of Common Core, there's a database. And if the database, all it did was take attendance, record test scores, and achievement tests and grades, that would be one thing. But it also includes things like, where mom and pop work, the parents' health history, political voting record, religious affiliation. 416 data points are part of the recommended federal database, and I don't care who's in power, Democrat or Republican. I find that a frightening thing, that our government can know everything about everybody.
Well, how would anybody know who I vote for?
Well, they wouldn't know who you vote for, and Wisconsin, remember, is exceptional in that we don't register by party. But
correct.
In the majority of states, you register as a Democrat, you register as a Republican, and I think this just gives Barack Obama a little easier time in identifying his political enemies and being able to pursue them. And I don't want to make anything easier. And believe me, it almost doesn't matter. I think some of my biggest fights are inside the Republican Party and not with Democrats.
Can you stand? Can you stand by? Ken, can you stand by? We've got to take a break here. Can you stand by?
Okay.
All right.
Then I want to address one more thing on Common Core.
Ken Van Doren's on the live line with us. He is running as a Republican in the 3rd Congressional District, currently held by Ron Kind. Ken, you wanted to say one more thing about Common Core?
Yes. The thing is going to be highly regimented, and the teachers are not going to be able to use the flexibility that they're used to in order to adapt programs to meet the individual needs of their kids. And the tests themselves are interactive, and the proponents, there's a number of them already on record saying it's not about facts and figures, it's about attitudes, inclinations, and beliefs. So effectively, it's brainwashing that is going to be incorporated into these tests. And what I want to say now is, don't take my word for it. Do a little bit of research, and then let's move on to another topic, Sly.
Let me ask you a little bit about why you think the economy has been so slow to recover in this recession.
Well, okay. Now, I'm an advocate of what's known as Austrian Economics, and they have the business cycle ciphered out this way. You create money out of thin air, you create distortions in the economy. You might, people who have access to capital, to credit, I should say, they might flood a market to an extent with production that can't be consumed, and you misappropriate. The creation of money out of thin air has interest artificially cheap. Businessmen make decisions on this artificially cheap money and the spending patterns that can't be maintained without continuing to increase the amount of dollars in the market until the economy reaches a point that it can't be sustained, and corrections are not only necessary but inevitable. And that pretty much describes, I remember in 2001, what's his name? Al Greenspan, he said, we will create the liquidity with which to float the markets. And at that point, I determined that ultimately the next crash was going to be bigger because Al didn't let it correct itself in 2001. And then 7 years later, guess what? It happened just the way I predicted.
How?
So,
I heard. Go ahead.
Right now we're trying to prop up bankrupt companies. We saved General Motors so that they could build 4 plants in China, for example. And there's still a lot of misdirection in the economy, and there's still a lot of corrections that need to be made. And the banksters are laughing all the way to the bank because the Federal Reserve creates money to drive the price of stocks and benefit, again, the people at the upper end of the scale, not the people at the lower.
I saw you interviewed by Greg Newman on statewide television, and you happened to mention a protest that I organized against Ron Kind when he held a fundraiser at a restaurant on the square in Madison. And, of course, my opposition to Ron Kind is primarily based on, although I think it was terrible he voted to deregulate Wall Street, voting for the repeal of Glass-Steagall. I thought that was terrible. I thought it was terrible he voted for the Iraq War. But what really gets me mad is that he continues to vote for these so-called, and this is just a brand name, free trade agreements that take away the sovereignty of the United States and ship jobs out of the country, including his sisters in Lacrosse footwear. Went hightailed to China. He cost his sister her job, and he still supports these.
Yeah, he's pretty stupid, or I don't know what he's thinking. Maybe he's
gets his money from Wall Street.
I think maybe it's loyal to his masters rather than stupidity. But, I've said for years, we literally tax the poor working stiff in the factory to have their jobs shipped to China and Singapore. And Ron Kind has been a big part of that. He also protests the fact that U.S. taxpayers pay $147 billion a year to Brazilian cotton growers. Why is that? Because of previous trade agreements, which Ron Kind is generally in favor of, and because we subsidize our own cotton farmers here. And you're right, we forfeit some of our sovereignty to the World Trade Organization when that authority belongs with U.S. Congress. The Congress has forfeited a lot of its authority to the administration, either the bureaucrats or the president. And Article 1, Section 1 says, all legislative powers shall be vested in a Congress. So if you want somebody who's going to powerfully reassert their legislative authority, you need to vote Ken Van Doren in.
Where do you come down on social issues like abortion and gay rights?
Well, here's the thing on gay rights, what you do behind closed doors, I really, it's none of my business. I don't want the government interfering in what goes on in your bedroom. I have friends who are gay. I don't approve of the lifestyle, but, I can accept it, I can tolerate it. And, it's not, the other thing is it's not the federal government's business anyway. I don't see that as federal government's business, and the same with abortion. That should be devolved to the states. Only those powers granted in Article 1, Section 1 belong to the...
But you are a citizen of Wisconsin. For instance, when the constitutional amendment was up in 2006, did you vote for it?
Which one was that?
The amendment to the state constitution that banned gay marriage.
2000. I don't think so. I can't remember.
Okay.
That bill was very poorly written. I would give gays, all the rights that they're looking for. Who cares who goes into the hospital room, the big thing that they're after is employee benefits, and those are going away in part because the federal government is making it too expensive to offer the set of employees.
That's a nice segue to the Affordable Care Act. Would you have voted for the Affordable Care Act?
Well, let me tell you, I was the first guy from the public to testify in Richland Center when there was about 500, 600, 700 people in the room, and I said, based on what I've read in the law, Mr. Congressman, how can you increase the bureaucracy, massively increase the regulations, and then tax the very goods and services that we all agree are too expensive and expect the price of health care to go down? And on this, Ron Kind refuses to back up an inch. If he didn't know then the answer, he has the answer now, but he can't even plead ignorance because I told him what was going to happen in 2009. He voted for it anyway. And again, the health care is not in Article 1, Section 8. It's none of the federal government's business.
So you don't think we should go to a single-payer system like Canada?
No. Everything the federal government touches turns to crap. Everything. I want, and the primary purpose of government is to protect individual rights. That means at the national level, defense, a system of courts to adjudicate differences between states and other things.
What separates between you and libertarians? What makes you a Republican versus a libertarian?
Well, two things. Number one, I call myself a conservatarian. I don't believe in totally open borders. There need to be some limits because there's 7 billion people who might want to come into this country. It will bankrupt us, and it might change our culture in ways that we're not going to like. I'm not totally against immigration. I'd rather have them coming through the front door than the back door. That's one thing, and the right to life thing. The other thing is that for a whole bunch of years, it's been drilled into my head it's a two-party system, and damn it, one party or the other better find room for people like me.
Okay, so you'd like to pull the party in the direction that Rand Paul's pulling it in. Is that right?
Well, he's kind of moderate, I think. But.
You think Rand Paul is moderate? Really?
I knew that. I said that. I think we're in very dire circumstances here because the country's going to hell. We're losing our freedom and we're bankrupting it. But as dire as our circumstances are, Sly, I want to have fun out on the trail. It's mandatory that Ken causes 15 to 20 people a day to laugh, and it's even better if he's one of them.
What's your game plan to win this thing? How are you raising money?
Well, raising money is the hard part. I think I'm near a break point where some of the money is going to start to flow. You know, anybody who wants the government off their back, they should be supporting me. Anybody who is concerned about the future of this country for their children, both in terms of freedom and opportunity, you know, these are likely people to support Ken. But you know, I'll admit the flow of cash has not been as significant as I would like. But Ron Kind is vulnerable. I don't need $2 million like he's likely to spend. All I need to do is expose the truth about Ron Kind, because you know he has an aversion to the truth, both in hearing it and in telling it. I have his hot buttons. I know how to take him on like no other candidate in this race. I'm the best prepared, the best informed on the issues, the most eloquent. I may or may not be the best financed. And oh, by the way, one of my opponents just threw in with the Republican establishment. So you know he's part of the old guard. He's part of the old guard of the Republican Party. It's kind of ironic. He's also the youngest guy, and me, the oldest man in the race, and part of the new wave that's trying to limit the government to that which is constitutionally authorized and fiscally responsible.
All right. Ken Van Doren, we got to wrap it up there. Thanks for coming on the show. We look forward to having you on again.
Okay, KenVanDoren.com, and look for me on Facebook. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Sly'sOffice.com.
Thanks for